Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
What is the creepiest non-paranormal thing that has happened to you? Episode 2. This is first time I have really talked about this moment in a long time. I do not remember all the details, but I will do my best. When I was in high school, my friend and I caught a 10 or 11 p.m. showing of some movie. The parking for the movie theater was on the 6th floor of parking structure. I parked my car at the far end of the lot because it was absolutely packed that night. When we got out of the movie around 1 a.m., the lot was empty except for my car. We walked towards it, and I jumped into driver's side and started the car. However, my friend on the other side did not move from behind my car. I rolled down the window and asked him what he was doing. He told me to get out of the car. I did not understand what he was talking about until I leaned over and looked through the passenger window. I saw a girl curled up leaning against the wall next to my car. I got out and walked around and saw she just had a top on, no underwear or pants, and she was sobbing. We asked if she was all right, but she did not say anything and kept sobbing. At that point, we assumed she must be held up on something and just ending up laying in the lot. Since cell phones were not around at that time, I decided to head back into the theater and ask someone to call the police officers. But the doors were locked, and all the lights were off. I head back over to my car and the condition of the girl was the same. I asked her if she wanted me to drive her somewhere and again no response. At that point, I told my friend we will just head out and call the police officers from a payphone on the street. He agreed, and while we were getting into my car, we saw a person walk up one of the ramps on the other side of the lot. This is where it gets fuzzy, but my friend saw what looked like a gun in his hand. He screamed at us, "Get away from my girl," or something to that nature, and started sprinting towards my car. I immediately freaked and I screamed at my friend to get in the car. He jumps in and I floored it past the guy screaming at us. He hits my cars as we go by, and I peel down the reaming floors out of the parking structure. I stopped at the first payphone I saw and called the police officers and reported what happened. A couple of days later, we found out that the man chasing us was a pimp and the girl was one of his hookers. What events led up to that incident, I never found out. A friend and I were driving across the state, Michigan, to pick up another friend and go to a concert. We got lost on our way because Google Maps told us to get off the highway and take back roads. Long story short, by the time we got to my friend's college to pick him up, the concert had started, and we had a 45-minute drive to the venue. We bailed on the concert and just hung around Rochester. It got to be around midnight and the drive home takes 3 hours, so we said our goodbyes and hit the road. Once again, Google Maps told us to get off the highway and take some kind of backwoods road. The first sign that something creepy was going to happen was the "Don't pick up hitchhikers" sign. We made a joke about it and kept driving. The directions told us to turn right onto a road and, because we did not look ahead on the list, we followed the turn. We wound up on a dirt road that quickly narrowed down to a little less than 2 proper lanes. If a car had been coming from the other way, I am not sure how we would have squeaked. On our right, there was a big, open field. On our left, trees. None of the trees had any leaves on them, even though it was one of the warmest Octobers we had had in years. Mid-70s all through September and into October. We drove up this road for a while and came to a stop sign, pulled through, and saw some spooky farmhouses off to our right. We are talking rundown 2-story homes with burnt-out barns and long driveways. Only one of the houses had any lights on. One light at the top of the house. An attic or an upstairs bedroom. After that house, there was a cemetery. And not a little country cemetery, with a couple dozen graves. We are talking rows and rows of dead people stretching into the dark. Oh, did I forget to mention that? It was pitch black along these roads. Just my high beams for light. After the cemetery we were supposed to take a left onto another dirt road. We did so in complete silence. I had turned the music down because it seemed too loud for what was happening. We drove down this new dirt road, now surrounded by bare trees. Then we came to another street and our directions said to turn left again. A weight grew in my stomach. Another street, another left. Those of you playing along at home may have realized by now that we were driving back towards the original street. The one we turned onto of the backwoods highway we started on. Sure enough, we got back to that road at that stop sign we drove through originally. The directions had us turn right onto that road, then take another right back onto the same highway. Going the same direction we were to begin with. We did not speak until we were miles away from there. My family owns some property on an island. It is quiet, especially when it is not summer or spring break. Sometimes you could walk down to the beach and see no one for a mile in either direction. My family was staying there for a week and one night my brother and I decided to go for a walk on the beach at night. The walk down the path was uneventful, other than the fact that it was pitch black. We make it to the beach and randomly pick a direction. Even though the sky is no longer obscured by trees, the darkness of the night was almost palpable. We were just able to see the darkness of the water to our left and the soft glow of the sand beneath our feet. We walk for a mile when, just barely audible above the crash and hiss of the ocean, we hear something. Almost like a whimper. But, no, we think. It was too faint. It must have just the whine that sand makes if you slide your foot on it. We continue walking a few more yards when we notice something ahead of us. A blot of darkness on barely visible sand. We strain our eyes trying to discern some shape. We walk closer. It is something. Closer. We hear the noise again. This time louder and more distinct. Like a dog with an ache. Not a yelp, but, like I said, a whimper. We are close enough now that the dark shape is beginning to take form. There is a round dark shadow with a smaller dark shadow that look like a head. I tell my brother I think it might be a sea turtle. I was wrong. We are still walking towards it. It has arms. Too many arms. Some are facing up, some down into the sand, but I cannot be sure. It is too dark. The noise. My brother grabs me. Gator. What is that? My heart is pounding. Is it a beached manatee? A dying sea beast? An alien washed ashore? There is a face on the head. I only know that because there are two darker spots on the darkness of what looked to be the head. The noise. I take one step closer. What are y'all looking at? I jump. My brother grabs me tighter. I hear a gasp of fear come from the beast. Then I realize what it was. It was a beast. The beast with two backs. My brother and I had just walked up on a couple having some midnight beach fun. We quickly apologized, turned around and double-timed it back down the beach. I come from a small village in the mountains of southern Michoacán, Mexico. Saw a lot of weird stuff out there. Me and my brother, around the age of 4 or 6, were responsible to make sure the family's goats got home from being out eating before the sun set. Usually we just released them and let them roam around. They didn't go far out much, and then by the end of the evening my brother and I just went out a few meters onto the wilderness and found them, rounded them up and followed them home. It was procedure already. Goats saw us and they began gathering up until all of them were together and we walked home. However, one night we decided to delay the escort and my father got mad at us. He made us go out in the night to find the goats and bring them home. Mind you, it was dark. Village had no electricity installed, so we used kerosene or petroleum lamps to illuminate our homes at night, sometimes the usual flashlight that was brought in from the nearest small city. I must also note that since there were no city lights or any light pollution at all, the moonlight and stars illuminated the night nicely. So, my brother and I headed out into the wilderness. We eventually found the pack of goats a bit farther out than usual. They noticed us and started gathering up. As we began walking back home, I recall spotting this tall figure down at the bottom of a hill we were descending from. It had the shape of a disfigured tall human being with long arms and a slender head. It was very visible because it gave out a glow, and it was somewhat of a silhouette in the distance, but rather than a dark shadow it had the texture of a TV channel with no reception, the old non-digital TV kinds. Just thinking about it gives me the chills. As naive as we were back then, no exposure to media, any alien propaganda or anything, just old tales of magical creatures from the grandma. My brother and I just kept herding the goats. Not sure you heard goat back home, pretending there was nothing down there staring at us. Another story involves moving down into the mountain valley with my family, making a temporary home made out of wheat plants. After removing the actual wheat part of it, we used the stalks and leaves to make walls and a roof, in which we stayed while we were contracted to manually cultivate a large wheat field. We stayed by a river on the edge of the field, and I recall staying up at night listening to the sounds of animals roaming nearby and occasionally seeing weird heads pop up above the walls of the house and stare at me. May have been humans just walking by and looking. Sometimes it was strange animals climbing up on the wall and sitting there. I also recall back in my home village, not the permanent house we had built near the wheat field, there was a black rider that came through town once in a while. The town was very small, maybe 4 to 7 houses with families spread out over a 20 to 25 acres or so. Sometimes everyone gathered in the town center at the end of the day to just congregate and talk, staying up past midnight. There were some nights when a black horse with a man passed through town. I remember just being a dark figure on the horse, very black, and passing through town, right through the middle of our gatherings, and the dogs barked at it and howled whenever it crossed by. No one ever dared say anything to him, as he never said anything back to anyone, just passed by through town from one end and towards the other end into the mountains. A couple summers ago my girlfriend and I were coming out of the grocery store when we happened upon a young woman. It was starting to rain, and she asked if she could bum a ride off us. I asked how far away it was. She said a little under a half-mile, and I said, sure. That half-mile was the most disturbing thing I have ever experienced. This lady talked about how her friends had abandoned her, how someone had tried to cut her wrists in her sleep and use the blood for a satanic ritual, how her cousin had died after jumping out of a moving car, except she claimed that he had to have been murdered, because he wouldn't kill himself. It was awful. When she got out, my girlfriend yelled at me for being a moron. I agreed with her. Never again. I was walking from one class to another in university. I had to go to another building. It takes a few minutes. The whole time I am walking, it feels like I am being followed. I do not turn around. I am not the only person on the street, of course there's people behind me. So why do I feel crawly, like I can feel eyes on me? I get to the building for my next class and decide to nip to the toilet before class begins. Still got that creeped out feeling, but now I am inside, not on the street. So just before I step into the ladies' room I turn around, and right behind me is a guy I have seen in some of my classes. We are face to face, that is how close behind me he was. He looked as scared as I felt, and he quickly shuffled off. I hate to think what might have happened if he had followed me right into the toilets. I went to Starbucks to do some homework, and it was not until I pulled them out that I realized my headphones had gotten chewed up by one of my cats. I was a little annoyed, since this was the 3rd or 4th pair that I lost to a cat's mouth, but it was also the iPod ones that have the little microphone and volume clicky thing on the wire. A little pricier to replace, but whatever, I knew I had a regular pair at home. So, I am sitting in the comfortable chair by the fireplace, and I had taken the headphones out at some point. They were on my left side, draped over my thigh. I reached down for them, and when I pulled them up, they were perfect. No chew marks, no wire stripping. I thought that someone left their pair stuck in the seat, and then I saw the volume tab. I thought, oh, weird. Well, someone must have forgotten theirs, and they happened to be the same as mine. But I could not find mine. I looked all over my person and chair. My chewed-up headphones were completely gone, and replaced with an identical, pristine pair. I must have looked disturbed, staring around at everyone near me, with this accusing look on my face. Either I really lucked out and found a lost pair of headphones while losing mine at the same time, or there is a Starbucks with a haunted chair that mysteriously repairs small, broken objects. I was getting gas in Portland, Oregon about 6 years ago, shortly after leaving the Horse Brass pub after having dinner with a couple of friends. I do not remember which gas station it was, but I recall it being a few blocks from Horse Brass. It should be noted that in the state of Oregon you are not allowed to pump your own gas. The station attendant was an old, bearded white guy with a steely look in his eyes. I told him to fill up the tank, and he did so, saying nothing. After he was done, he leaned in close to my window and whispered in a gravelly voice, "You see that guy over there?" He motioned toward the corner of the building where a young black man was pacing nervously. "He's getting ready to kill me." I said, "Really? How do you know?" "I can see it in his eyes. I am not afraid of him. I already been dead once." I had no idea what to say, so I just paid and get out of there. My friend who was in the passenger seat was really stoned and it freaked him out so bad he was on the verge of tears. I am still completely dumbfounded and creeped out by that experience. One of my friends has some land out in the country, and he invited a group of about 8 of us to go up there for the weekend. One night, we are all sitting around a fire near the edge of the woods. There has been some smoking and drinking but not enough that we were crazy or anything. Anyway, we are all joking and talking and just having an enjoyable time when suddenly one of the guys, let us call him Mike, looks over at the woods and freezes. His face goes dark as his eyes widened and mouth slowly opens. By now we've all frantically glanced at the forest to see only trees. Finally, one of us breaks the silence to ask him what is wrong, and he cuts us off mid-sentence to alert us of the hooded man in black that is standing at the edge of the forest. We all look over again, hoping to see nothing but expecting to see something. Again, only trees. We reassure him that there is nobody there, to which he responds, "The hooded man. He wants to kill yell." Now this is not exactly what you want to be told around midnight in a remote location. Especially when we are all a bit under the influence. Starting to get panicked, we started joking about it, saying, "Oh here he comes," but Mike's expression does not change. "He's walking over here. He is going to kill us. Touch my shoulder and end this." Now we are really starting to get freaked out. Plus, we have no idea what the shoulder bit means. Mike's anxiety and hostility continue to increase, and he keeps repeating, "The hooded man, the man in black, he wants to kill you, touch my shoulder and end this." Finally, he bursts into tears. We sat in silence for a few minutes while he sobbed, and then his trance was broken. After this pleasant encounter with unseen hooded murderers, Mike's buddy tells us that Mike has had a reoccurring dream his entire life of a hooded man in black killing his entire family, then right before he kills Mike he touches his shoulder and Mike wakes up. Either way, that was the creepiest night of my life. One time I broke into an abandoned building on a dark, cloudy night, no moon. I was alone, underage, and looking for a place to drink a shoplifted 40 of OE. I wander around looking for the best spot. There's busted out windows, cool views, lots of graffiti and trash. Then I go into this upper level area and eventually up this janky stairway onto the roof where there is a buckled of Nazi/white supremacist/Satanist stuff painted all over and the embers of a fire, concrete building, still burning with a bunch of rolls of toilet paper and empty peanut butter jars and clothes and magazines everywhere. So, I am like, oh, and run back towards the ground floor, dropping my crappy flashlight on the way and being in the pitch dark, and then, I freeze. Someone is running crazy fast up and down the halls, doing sweeps. I end up finding a fire escape thing out a window and clamber me down it, dropping several feet into some bushes, somehow not shattering the 40 or my lanky young body. One of the scarier moments of my young life. I chugged the 40 as soon as I stopped hyperventilating, and I never went back to that place. So, me, some of my friends, and all our dads decide that we should have a nice camping trip where we all do manly things and bond with each other. So, we do some team-building exercises, play some football, cook hot dogs, etc. then decide to hit the hay. Well, around 3 in the morning we hear rustling, very loud rustling coming from across the creek we pitched camp on. The rustling eventually progresses to splashing and indistinct mumbling and moaning, slowly getting closer to our campsite. So, we are all starting to freak out a bit until one of the dads calls out, "Who's there?" No answer. Someone decides to grab a flashlight to investigate. The investigation turned up a hopelessly lost and ridiculously drunk college kid flailing around in the creek. The dads help him out of the water, dry him off, and take him where he needed to go. Apparently, some of his friends thought it would be funny to ditch him on the side of the road, and he wandered several miles onto the piece of farmland we were camping on. It was providential though, because if he would have wandered further in the direction he was going he would have fallen from the couple-foot deep creek into a 20 or so foot deep swimming hole, so we very well might have saved that guy's life that night. So, me, some of my friends, and all our dads decide that we should have a nice camping trip where we all do manly things and bond with each other. So, we do some team-building exercises, play some football, cook hot dogs, etc. then decide to hit the hay. Well, around 3 in the morning we hear rustling, very loud rustling coming from across the creek we pitched camp on. The rustling eventually progresses to splashing and indistinct mumbling and moaning, slowly getting closer to our campsite. So, we are all starting to freak out a bit until one of the dads calls out, "Who's there?" No answer. Someone decides to grab a flashlight to investigate. The investigation turned up a hopelessly lost and ridiculously drunk college kid flailing around in the creek. The dads help him out of the water, dry him off, and take him where he needed to go. Apparently, some of his friends thought it would be funny to ditch him on the side of the road, and he wandered several miles onto the piece of farmland we were camping on. It was providential though, because if he would have wandered further in the direction he was going he would have fallen from the couple-foot deep creek into a 20 or so foot deep swimming hole, so we very well might have saved that guy's life that night. When I was younger, I used to get sick a lot. Strep throat and ear infections often bring about extremely high fevers. High fevers lend themselves to hallucinations. My mother was no stranger to me spinning wild fantasies while lost in these dark reveries. I once told her I ate glass and was absolutely convinced that it was true, so much so that my mother started to believe me. Anyway, I was 11 or 12 years old and on vacation with my family in Hawaii. Naturally, I develop a terrible ear infection, complete with a dangerously high fever. Hallucination struck at about midnight when I woke up from the pain in my ear. I was sleeping on a convertible couch in the front room area of this little grass house and saw, though the sliding glass doors, an elderly woman rocking in a rocking chair on the porch. She was shrouded in a dark cloak so that I could not see any of her features, but I still knew it was an elderly woman. She slowly stopped rocking and turned to face me directly and then reached a skeletal hand up to lower the hood of her robes. As the moonlight revealed her features to me, the idea of an elderly visage melted into the bared bone of a skull. Her eye sockets were empty, but I still knew that she was staring straight at me. I am not sure how a skull grins, but she did in that moment. Then, she stood up, collected her scythe, and stalked off the porch. I looked out of the living room window that my bed was situated under to watch her stand a little way away and watch a procession of people make their way down the beach. As the party of people drew closer, I saw that they were carrying a casket. A little boy was trailing behind the procession, looking blue. The casket was set beneath my window by the group of people and the lid was opened, to reveal the same little boy that I had seen. He was following his own funeral. It was in that fever-riddled moment that I understood I was going to die someday. Thinking about what I saw that night still leaves me with a ball of fear spinning wildly in my abdomen. 17 years later, and that memory turns me right back into a terrified little girl. A few weeks ago, I took a walk in the wee hours of the morning. My house is about a mile's worth of dirt road away from the main road. I was just going to walk to the main road, which is where one of the neighbors' paddocks is for their horses. I like their horses, huge draft horses. Anyhow. So, I get about halfway up the road, and I spot this big black mass in the middle of the road. It is dark, and it is a snake coiled up. Before I get too close to it, I turn on a flashlight and shine it at the mass. It is a rabbit. With his head on backwards. It is odd seeing this baby rabbit with its head on backwards, eyes wide open. Still reflective. Still warm. Odd because I got to see this little guy go from ugly pink thing to bunny. And now he is in the middle of the road with his head on backwards. I move along because I realized I had interrupted whatever killed the rabbit's meal. I do not want it to go to waste. On my way back, the rabbit was gone, so he did not go to waste. Hopefully. It is just odd though, because there really is not anything big enough that I know of to be eating our rabbits that lives around here. About 5 years ago, my friend and I were working on a Saturday afternoon at our church, doing some random cleaning since the maintenance guy was on vacation for the week. Important to note, we were the only people in the building and have been all day. We are standing in the kitchen, which is off the church's gym, and from through the kitchen door you have a clear view of the gym's main door out to the atrium and church entrance. So, we are just talking, and over his shoulder I see this random Domino's guy walk in with a big sack of hot, delicious pizza. He asks if we ordered it, which we did not, and so we are confused for a bit and think our boss had been nice and sent us some pizza while we work. So, we call our boss and he said that, no, he did not order any pizza. The pizza guy leaves, just taking the hit that he had the wrong address somehow, and after 30 seconds of us discussing the craziness of the situation, a thought dawns on me: how did he get in? We go check all the doors, and every single one of them, to every part of the church, is shut tight and locked. And the kicker, no other car is in the parking lot. So incredibly creepy. Last weekend, I went to see Ted. It was great. I was laughing so hard I was crying. And then there was a point when I just froze. I started to hyperventilate. All because I saw Norah Jones singing "Come Away With Me" on an enormous movie screen. Now I can only imagine that as you read this, you are thinking to yourself, why is this guy freaking out from Norah Jones? Well, it is because about 6 months ago, I woke up from a dream like a shot of adrenaline was injected straight into my heart. Pulp Fiction style. I never remember my dreams. Ever. But for some crazy reason, I remembered this one. In my dream, I was sitting in a movie theater, holding hands with the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. As we sat there, Norah Jones was singing "Come Away With Me." I remember feeling that it was the happiest time in my life. As I watch old NJ up on the big screen, I look over to the woman I am holding hands with. Short black hair, tattoos, the most beautiful green eyes I have ever seen. She says, "I love you." And I know she means it. I tell her the same thing back, meaning every syllable. Then I look back to the movie screen. That is when I wake up. I look to my left, and my, at the time, wife is lying in bed next to me. She looks nothing like the woman in my dream. I go from insurmountable happiness in a dream to being miserable in real life in an instant. My ex-wife and I were miserable with each other. So, we decided to get a divorce 3 months ago. Best decision we have ever made. Shortly after, I started dating a smoking hot chick covered in tattoos who just happens to be a Redditor. So, as I sit there watching Norah in the theater, I start to get a funny feeling, like de jam vu. I look at my GF, she looks me in the eyes and says, "I love you." I am scared and have a heart attack. She is the woman from the dream. It played out the same in real life as it did in the dream. Same woman, same singer, same location, same beautiful eyes, same song, even the same emotions. I tell her, I love you too, and look back at the screen. I then spend the next 20 minutes trying not to totally freak out in the movie theater. Last weekend, I went to see Ted. It was great. I was laughing so hard I was crying. And then there was a point when I just froze. I started to hyperventilate. All because I saw Norah Jones singing Come Away With Me on an enormous movie screen. Now I can only imagine that as you read this, you are thinking to yourself, why is this guy freaking out from Norah Jones? Well, it is because about 6 months ago, I woke up from a dream like a shot of adrenaline was injected straight into my heart. Pulp Fiction style. I never remember my dreams. Ever. But for some crazy reason, I remembered this one. In my dream, I was sitting in a movie theater, holding hands with the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. As we sat there, Norah Jones was singing Come Away With Me. I remember feeling that it was the happiest time in my life. As I watch old NJ up on the big screen, I look over to the woman I am holding hands with. Short black hair, tattoos, the most beautiful green eyes I have ever seen. She says, I love you. And I know she means it. I tell her the same thing back, meaning every syllable. Then I look back to the movie screen. That is when I wake up. I look to my left, and my, at the time, wife is lying in bed next to me. She looks nothing like the woman in my dream. I go from insurmountable happiness in a dream to being miserable in real life in an instant. My ex-wife and I were miserable with each other. So, we decided to get a divorce 3 months ago. Best decision we have ever made. Shortly after, I started dating a smoking hot chick covered in tattoos who just happens to be a Redditor. So, as I sit there watching Norah in the theater, I start to get a funny feeling, like de jam vu. I look at my GF, she looks me in the eyes and says, I love you. I am scared and have a heart attack. She is the woman from the dream. It played out the same in real life as it did in the dream. Same woman, same singer, same location, same beautiful eyes, same song, even the same emotions. I tell her, I love you too, and look back at the screen. I then spend the next 20 minutes trying not to totally freak out in the movie theater. I stalked by 3 big felines in the woods. Not everyone had a light source. We were above them by about 25 foot on an old railroad trail, and they were about 70 feet out and 30 feet between each of them. They kept their distance, low to the ground, quietly following us to the end of the railroad where there was once a bridge over a small river and the trail back to our vehicles lead away from where they were prowling. I am 90% positive they were juvenile or young adult mountain lions. Growing up, I would spend every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. at a friend of my dad's. They would play D&D at his house. He has an exotic pet/caretaker's license and worked with the Human Society. He had a formerly abused, front-declawed, adult male mountain lion for many years until he had to give him back because he got loose a few times and killed too many of the neighbors' dogs. This is out in corn country, spending so much time watching and playing and interacting with that beautiful beast, Thunder. I have a pretty good idea what they look like in the dark, eye position, eye shine, color, movements and stances, for color, size, etc. They are about the same color as deer, but the eyes are very distinct. It is more likely to have been bobcats or coyote, but that does not mean that is what they were. Size alone will tell you, and the only things of that color and size are deer and men lion. I know they do not usually hunt in packs like the African lioness, but I believe this to be either a mother and her juvenile/young adult offspring learning how to stalk and the like, or 3 young adults gathering to mate, or even a learned behavior adapted to deal with their dwindling habitat and food source. Who knows, perhaps they needed to find a better way to hunt after much of their food source has learned to avoid human hunters, Anyways, sorry so long, but even if the small chance that I am willing to admit my ID was wrong, we were being stalked quietly by 3 large tannish animals which seemed to be using precise tactics with each other, and that was pretty creepy. On edge, lol.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.